in Brooklyn, in Dumbo, and you flew in from Columbus, Ohio. How was your trip?
A lot of security. They made me take my shoes off. They strip search you pretty much. They ran all the tapes through the X-ray machine.
Even though you asked them not to, right?
Yeah, I asked them, please don't do that.
But they ran it through a special machine, you said.
Yeah, well, it's those big X-ray machines that they have at the airports and stuff.
Yeah.
But I checked the tapes, and the tapes they look like they're okay, the videotapes. So I'm assuming the audio tapes are cool too, so.
That's good.
It was intense.
Yeah.
It was real intense. Nazis.
Nazis. Did your flight leave on time and everything? Was that cool?
Yeah, it was packed to the gills. They had us in there like sardines.
Yeah.
And met Julie Otten at the airport. She's a Columbus boat.
Yeah, that's cool.
And got here in one piece.
All right, what do you remember about the Lorca Grave sessions?
I remember Jim, man. He's like, wow. He was so, he was like into it. And you know how funny he was. I think he'd be getting off if he didn't fucking kill himself.
Yeah.
Got a little depressed.
Yeah, I guess. What about his guitar playing and shit? You know, like when we'd start something, he'd just kind of hook right into it in his own weird way and do some amazing guitar stuff.
Yeah, him and Thurston Moore, they both got that sonic thing going on, incinerary insect sound going on.
Uh-huh.
I think Jim was a little more intense with it than, he was a little more into noise, I guess, and noise guitar, but
yeah.
He was a really good guitar player. He knew all the basics, and he knew all his scales and chords and everything. He just didn't like to do that.
Yeah.
He liked to do all that.
He wanted to create a different sound than what everyone else is getting from the instrument.
And his riff started to evolve around that noise. He got it to the point where he was putting, it's almost like cut and paste. He'd put these noise clips on his guitar together, and all of a sudden it was kind of like Eric Clapton in a way, because how like Eric has these patterns and Jimmy Page has these patterns, but Jim was doing it with kind of like noise and stuff. He had certain riffs that were really unusual formations, really strange formations he would get.
Right. But they all fit together and sounded great. But
somehow he was able to do that, and I don't know how, he just had really strange finger patterns, which is, plus, I don't know how in the hell he was able to do the poetry over top of playing like that, because it was like, if you listen to like some of his songs, it's like a stream of consciousness, but yet it was all organized and worked out, but it would go against the grain, like if you have like a regular 4/4 beat and you're accenting second and a fourth, you can only get so many beats within, a measure.
Right.
And he was able to manipulate time with his words, with the syllables and stuff, what iambic, what are those?
Pentameter?
Yeah, all those. He's able to squeeze that in somehow. It was like he forced his words into these limiting little measures.
Right, but it still sounded good. It didn't sound forced, which was cool.
Well, plus, his words were fucking really cool too.
I know, it's true.
He had some strange little hooks. One of the things I remember back in the old days, he used to have this one thing about Operation Mindfuck. And the other day I was reading, how the culture feeds back on itself. I was reading a journalist, and he was saying, this band is Operation Mindfuck, So his words, people pick up on his words, and then they incorporate it into what they're doing. So,
right.
So we're here, and we're going to try to see if we can maybe do justice to fallen comrade in arms, and
right.
See how it works out.
What kind of effects was he using? Because he had some pretty strange guitar sounds, and I don't know whether it was all the way he played it, or partially the way, because I know part of it was the effects he put in, but I don't know what effects he was using.
He used to use an tape Echoplex, and I think that's what, like the old reel-to-reel 2-track Well, this old Echoplex had like a cartridge in it, and he'd play around, and he'd almost get it to, fucking around with it, almost get it to sound like a synthesizer.
Mm-hmm.
And then he figured out he was onto something, so he started to do that with his recording techniques and stuff. He started to use sound, raw sound, and organize the chaos and discipline it and format it, and it's really interesting if you listen to some of the stuff, earlier stuff that he did. Was like that first album was '78 was really fucking off the wall. I mean, that was highly unusual. Nobody was, but now everybody does that. It's like all the kids are into noise and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. He was pretty ahead of his time in that respect.
Yeah, he was really out there. I don't know if you heard that Slip and Pre-Slit album, but
yeah, he was into post-punk before and during punk.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
in a weird way.
yeah. Now, what about when he would incorporate found sounds or sound, like he'd use the train that was near his house and shit, but it would fit with the guitar. He'd like fit his other sounds in with it somehow.
That whole sonic thing is a really interesting area to explore. I've always liked to do it like Bernard Herrmann. You go out and you try to discover these sounds and, you know, these noises, like if you hear a car horn and then you hear a washing machine, and you juxtaposition the two sounds and try to get it, the whole piece to sound, you know, like War of the Worlds or something. But he created soundscapes kind of with that, you know. Even towards the end, he was doing a lot of soundscape stuff, you know, in that motorcycle movie.
Yeah.
Real interesting experiments, but I always wanted him to do pop music with it.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to take that and make it Barry Manilow.
Uh-huh.
And we would have got there if he hadn't fucking got a little depressed. You know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. A little depressed. I think he was a lot depressed to do that.
You know, his feet were, he literally willed himself to die. His feet were on the ground, and he literally held his feet up in order to choke himself.
Wow.
It's like a brutal death.
Yeah.
Brutal.
And you know, the thing is, I mean, you were a lot closer to him than I was, of course, and probably closer than almost anybody. But I had no idea he would ever contemplate such a thing. And I knew he was a little moody and a little bit, you know, moody in terms of like a little dark and maybe sometimes kind of a strange character. But I never felt like he was like wanted to kill himself or anything. And I don't think you had that impression either.
Well, if you study his art, he was always about death.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, he was always, and he just had this morbid fascination about death.
Right, but I mean, he didn't seem like a person who was always negative about things and talked about ending his life, right? I mean. No,
yeah, he was a comedian. He was very, very funny. And
yeah, exactly.
He had a devastating, articulate wit that would just slice people like razor blades. I mean,
yeah.
he didn't suffer fools lightly. I seen a lot of people come up to him, and he just. You know how people have their agendas and they want stuff, and he would just like devastate them, you know.
But on the other hand, if somebody came up and even if they were saying stupid things, but he could tell they were a good soul, you know, they weren't out for something. He was so nice to everybody, except if somebody was trying to manipulate him. He knew it right away.
If they were arrogant or, you know, like unimportant, self-important
people,
and he didn't. He tore those people up. If you read some of those interviews he did, some of the journalists. He was making fun of the journalists who were asking serious questions, and if you read his comments, it's really hilarious. It's like he was totally putting these people down. They didn't even realize it. You know, I think there was one interview that he did with the forced exposure? I don't know. I can't remember. But the journalist asked him, "What was the most important gig you ever did?" You know, and that was insulting to Jim because he's like. Who gives a fuck? And so it just says the corn festival. And the guy was like, huh? Where's the corn festival? Oh, Vienna, Ohio. And the journalist thought it was a big deal. Actually, there was only 2 people that showed up for the gig. This journalist thought it was like a big prestigious.
Right.
There's a bunch of farmers getting together with their tractors and shit. And we were out there, you know, in the middle of the cow pies, you know, doing, you know, like Sonic Youth shit, you know. The farmers are like tripping, you know, because it was just like 85.
What was like the famous? There was like a Hendrix show in the Mediterranean somewhere or something. What was that? I'm trying to think of
Well, it's just a
juxtapose this,
juxtaposition
like a
of
really
cultural
famous
values.
famous '60s music festival or something, you know. I guess Altamont is like, oh, the Corn Festival, yeah.
Well, the Corn Festival was like Hicksville, man. I mean,
Exactly.
It was,
But I mean, he
honest to
might.
God, Hilljacks, you know.
Right, but the guy might have been thinking, oh yeah, it's some kind of famous
Well,
rock
yeah, he
festival
thought it
or
was
something.
like a big deal, you know. He thought it was like, you know, Madison Square Garden or something.
Right,
you know.
that's cool.
And but he was a hell of a guy, Jim was. He damn near took me down the tubes with him. I was.
You were depressed.
Yeah,
I knew you were
been in
depressed.
therapy
after.
for like what 5 or 6 years to the darkness. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
that dark light, man. It just sucks you right down, man.
Vortex.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, he was like drinking a 12-pack a night to try to get to sleep. You know, he almost burned himself up like 3 or 4 times in bed. He would get real drunk and light a cigarette, and mattress would catch on fire, and people would smell the smoke, and he's like sleeping and his shit's on fire, and people would come in, Jim, you know. It happened quite a few times, and towards the end he was pissing blood, and he just, Squid, I don't know how much more I can take of this. And the weird thing was, it wasn't like he wasn't successful. He had like 30 grand in the bank. He left like $2,000 or $3,000 on the table. And I can't figure it out. You know, I mean, it
What was he
wasn't about
pissing?
money.
Why was he
Yeah.
pissing blood, Squid? What was wrong with him?
I don't know. I know that like alcoholics, some of them piss blood after a while, after you've get chronic with it.
Yeah.
And Jim loved to drink. He just loved to drink. You know, he was into that, what's that Bartowski riff, you know, the Kerouac poet, drunken poets, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, he was just a dark angel.
Yeah, and that's going to do you in one way or the other eventually, if not psychologically, then physically. So maybe he
Yeah.
just took the way out before his
Yeah, he
physical
probably figured
decline.
he had cancer or something, but,
Yeah.
you know, he didn't want to fucking deal with it. And, but it was such a brutal death, hanging yourself on the door.
Right.
He went out and he got some, you know that stuff they bale hay with, the rope they use on that?
Mm-hmm.
And a
Heavy duty twine.
No, lightweight twine.
Oh.
Lightweight. I mean, you could probably pull it apart with your hands, but he'd like double it up, and then, you know, on the door, you had like this thing where you put your coats on, and he wrapped it around that, he put it on his neck, and he stood on a trash can, knocked the trash can out, but the rope stretched because he was so heavy,
Mhm.
so he just held his feet up. And that takes like 3 or 4 minutes to die,
Mhm.
you know, and he willed himself. The body rebels. It's like, put your feet down, you gotta get air, you know?
Right.
It's instinct. And he just literally willed himself.
Yeah.
And,
The door that we hear at the end of Lorca's grave slamming, actually,
Yeah.
which is pretty freaky.
yeah,
Because I was in his room with them when we recorded that.
yeah, you saw that door, didn't you?
Yeah, I heard it slam, and it's
And for a
freaky
guy
sound.
who had so much respect and had such a great future, I didn't just,
Yeah.
go
It's-
figure.
It's a waste, but, you know, we do have what we did record, and so we're going to work on that right now.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah.
segue to get back to business here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Squid. Good story.